Princess Queen Liara walked slowly along the golden corridors of the Elendorian palace, her steps echoing softly against the polished floors. The walls shimmered with floating lights, casting delicate patterns that danced like starlight across her path. Elendor, her kingdom, stretched across 3 planets, each connected by vast fleets and bridges of pure energy. Its people admired her not just for her beauty, but for her sharp mind and fearless rule. She had been trained in diplomacy, strategy, and combat since she could remember, and she had always believed herself ready for anything. Yet today, something made her chest tighten. The council had announced the upcoming marriage to a human from Earth, a being so far removed from Elendor that most considered him fragile, unworthy, or even foolish. Humans were unpredictable, impulsive, and weak compared to Elendorians, who had evolved with centuries of careful refinement. The princess had expected someone timid, someone she could guide easily, someone who would fit neatly into her life without question. Instead, cattle was set to arrive, and she could not shake a sense of unease. When the ship carrying Kale finally descended, the palace courtyard was crowded with guards, ministers, and curious citizens. The vessel was small, almost comically so compared to the massive Elendorian cruisers, but it hummed with quiet power. Its metal hull was polished, yet there was a simplicity to it, an elegance that did not demand attention, but drew it naturally. Liara's heart beat faster as the ramp lowered. Kale stepped out. He was tall but not intimidating, his build lean, his hair dark and slightly disheveled. His eyes, however, held a calm certainty that unsettled her. Unlike other humans she had read about or observed, he carried no fear, no awe, and no need to impress. He simply stood, looked around, and nodded politely to the waiting crowd. "I hope we both find strength in this union," he said, his voice steady and clear. It was not loud nor demanding, yet it carried a weight she could not ignore. The council muttered among themselves, some scoffing at the idea that this human could ever measure up to Elendorian expectations. Liara, for her part, concealed a flicker of curiosity. Something about him was different. The wedding ceremony was held in the Grand Hall, a structure that seemed carved from crystal and gold, its ceiling stretching into the sky as though it were a piece of Elendor's stars themselves. The people cheered politely, though whispers ran through the crowd. "The human will never last. He cannot handle her intellect. Watch closely. He will crumble." Liara's smile remained poised, her eyes hidden behind calm grace, but inside she was alert, observing every movement of her new consort. Kale, however, moved with surprising ease. He did not stumble over the complicated traditions, or bow incorrectly. When he spoke vows, they were simple yet thoughtful, acknowledging not just Liara, but the responsibilities and challenges they would face together. He made no attempt to charm or flatter, yet somehow his words resonated with sincerity that even the hardened court could not ignore. Lyra felt an unexpected stir of admiration. In the days that followed, she watched him closely. Kale struggled with etiquette. He used the wrong fork at meals and sometimes spoke out of turn in council meetings. But he was quick to learn, faster than anyone expected. The palace staff noticed it too, whispering about his strange brilliance. He asked questions no one had considered and solved minor problems, with solutions so elegant that Liara found herself taking notes. She began testing him, presenting challenges and observing his responses. He was patient, clever, and unusually perceptive. One evening, the palace was buzzing with preparations for a feast celebrating the alliance of Elendor's planets. Liara and Kale were walking through the palace gardens, a place filled with glowing flowers that reacted to touch and shimmering water streams that sang as they flowed. She decided to test him further. "Kale," she said, "imagine you are faced with a rival kingdom, threatening war. You cannot rely on Elendorian power. How would you protect our people?" Kale paused, looking at her carefully. "I would first understand why they seek war. Every action has motivation. Then I would find a solution that addresses their needs without sacrificing ours. Sometimes the strongest response is not force, but clever negotiation." Liara raised an eyebrow. "You speak as if the answer is simple. Our rivals have armies larger than planets, and their fleets can destroy cities. And yet, he said, humans survive worse odds all the time. We adapt. We observe. We use what we have to turn disadvantage into advantage. She felt a shiver run through her. He spoke with confidence, yet there was no arrogance. No Elendorian she had met could match such quiet certainty. She wondered how much he truly understood about the vast threats of the galaxy, and whether she could afford to underestimate him. The feast arrived, a spectacle of light, music, and delicacies that seemed impossible to taste without being overwhelmed. Delegates from neighboring systems came, each carrying their own agendas and subtle challenges. Liara introduced Kale formally, expecting him to stumble. To her surprise, he moved among the guests with a strange grace, answering difficult questions with ease, and even deflecting veiled insults with humor and poise. Some ministers whispered in disbelief. How can a human do this? He charms without effort. Is he intelligent? Liara remained silent, but inside, she felt a mixture of curiosity and caution. He was human, yes, but far from ordinary. Later, in the privacy of the royal chambers, she allowed herself to speak openly. Kale, I admit I expected someone fragile, someone simple. You are neither. He smiled faintly. I expected you to judge me. I hoped you would not. Strength is not always visible at first glance. Humans survive by learning quickly, thinking creatively, and sometimes taking risks others avoid. I hope to show you that I can be more than you expect. Liara studied him in silence. There was something in his calm confidence, a quiet fire that did not seek attention but commanded respect. She felt both unnerved and intrigued. This human, whom the galaxy dismissed as weak, seemed poised to challenge everything she believed about strength, leadership, and survival. Days turned into weeks, and Kale's presence became a subtle force within the palace. He noticed flaws in Elendor's systems, communication delays between planets, inefficient military planning, and even the way resources were allocated to citizens. He proposed changes, and though some were met with skepticism, others proved effective almost immediately. Liara observed it all with increasing admiration, realizing that humans' greatest power was their unpredictability and resilience. One night, during a routine inspection of the palace defenses, Liara noticed Kale studying a holographic map of their planetary fleet. You are thinking about strategy, she remarked, surprised at his level of analysis. Always, he replied. I cannot rely on assumptions. I watch patterns, anticipate reactions, and prepare for the unexpected. That is how humans survive in a universe that often underestimates us. She looked at him closely. And you think you can protect Elendor? He met her gaze steadily. I do not think. I know we can. Not because of power alone, but because humans find solutions when others surrender to fear. And sometimes, he added softly, the unexpected is the most powerful weapon of all. Liara felt her heart tighten. In all her years, she had never met someone so confident, yet humble, so observant yet daring. For the first time, she wondered if the galaxy's assumptions about humans were all wrong. Perhaps they were not fragile or chaotic. Perhaps they were something entirely different, something far more dangerous to underestimate. The night ended with a quiet tension, a mixture of curiosity, caution, and anticipation. Liara could feel that her life, her kingdom, and perhaps the entire galaxy would never be the same with Kale by her side. He was human, yes, but already, in ways she could not yet define, he was extraordinary, and somewhere deep within her, a spark of excitement ignited. She realized that marrying a human might not be a mistake after all. It might be the beginning of a force the galaxy could never predict. The first signs of trouble arrived quietly, like a shadow sliding across Elendor's gleaming cities. Liara was in her study, examining reports from the outer planets, when one of her advisors entered, face pale and voice tight. Your Majesty, there are reports of unusual activity near the Zirin cluster. Ships, movement, unusual signals. They may be preparing an attack. Lyra's brow furrowed. The Zirins were notorious across the galaxy, a fierce and cunning race that prized domination above all else. Alindor's fleets were strong, but even they had trouble predicting Zirin's strategy. She glanced toward Kale, who was quietly observing the room, listening without interruption. "What do you propose we do?" she asked. Kale stepped forward, voice calm. "First, we observe. Do not act out of fear. Every enemy reveals themselves through patterns. If we study their movements carefully, we can anticipate their actions before they reach our borders." The council exchanged uneasy glances. Elendorians prided themselves on immediate, decisive action. Delay was rarely acceptable. Liara, however, saw merit in Kale's approach. "Prepare surveillance drones," she said. "We will watch, and we will learn." For the next week, Kale worked alongside the military strategists, pointing out weaknesses in their surveillance protocols, ways to detect anomalies earlier, and methods to interpret signals that the Elendorian systems had overlooked. His suggestions were unconventional, relying less on brute computation and more on observation, intuition, and creative thinking. One evening, Liara found him in the palace garden again, studying the stars. "You seem calm about this threat," she said, curiosity in her tone. Kale smiled faintly. Humans survive in unpredictable conditions. Calm is part of the process. Panic never helps. Liara shook her head, impressed despite herself. "Do you really think you can outsmart the Zirins? They've defeated fleets twice the size of ours." He tilted his head, eye scanning the sky. "I do not rely on size. I rely on patterns. I rely on understanding the enemy's choices and their fears. Strength is not always measured by numbers, Your Majesty. Sometimes it is measured by strategy, creativity, and the ability to adapt." The words lingered in her mind. She had expected a fragile, clumsy human. Instead, she had found a partner who thought in ways Elendorians rarely considered. 3 days later, their patience was tested. Scouts reported an unexpected approach. A Zirin strike team was moving toward Elendor's planetary fleet, faster than predicted, bypassing the usual patrols. The council panicked. "We must engage immediately," several generals shouted. Kale, however, remained calm. "No," he said firmly. "If we rush blindly, we will fall into their trap. We need to predict their path and use it against them." Liara's hand trembled slightly as she considered his advice. Acting too quickly could spark disaster, yet hesitating was dangerous. She trusted him. "Prepare a defensive perimeter, but hold your attack. Follow Kale's instructions." Kale spent hours coordinating drones, rerouting ships, and creating decoy signals. He instructed the fleet to maneuver in ways that seemed illogical at first glance, but formed a trap when viewed from a broader perspective. Elendorian commanders were skeptical, muttering under their breath about risking the fleet on a human's plan. Kale ignored them, moving with the quiet confidence that had become familiar to Lyra. When the Zirin fleet arrived, they fell straight into the trap. Decoy signals drew their ships into narrow corridors between energy fields, while the Elendorian fleet waited in concealed positions. Kale directed the defense with precision, coordinating attacks that exploited the Zirins' every weakness. Within hours, the intruders were neutralized or captured, many surprised that a smaller, weaker fleet could outperform their expectations. Liara watched in awe. Kale did not celebrate. He simply observed, adjusting the fleet to ensure no threat remained. The council, once dismissive, now whispered in astonishment. One elder muttered, He thinks like a human, and yet he surpasses us." After the battle, Lyra approached him. "I do not understand. How did you anticipate their every move?" Kale shrugged lightly. Patterns exist everywhere. I watched their fleet, listened to the signals, observed their choices. Elendorians plan with precision, which is admirable, but predictable. Humans thrive where others are too rigid. We improvise, adapt, and act on instinct when logic fails. The realization hit Lyra like a cold wind. She had spent her life preparing for threats the Elendorian way, relying on strength, training, and discipline. Yet here was a human, thought weak by her people, showing her that the galaxy's rules could be bent, broken, and rewritten. In the days that followed, Kale continued to surprise the palace. He reorganized supply lines, optimized fleet deployment, and even resolved disputes among the council with solutions that balanced diplomacy, psychology, and strategy. Elendorian ministers began to consult him privately, some still hesitant, others openly admiring his insight. One morning, Liara received news that the Zirons were sending envoys to discuss terms. Many advisors expected Kale to falter under the pressure of direct negotiation. Yet when the envoys arrived, Kale remained composed. He listened carefully to their demands, asked questions no one had thought to ask, and offered solutions that addressed both Elendor's needs and the Zirons' fears. The negotiations concluded not with threats or displays of power, but with respect and agreement. The Zirons departed, grudgingly acknowledging Elendor's intelligence and cunning. Lyra could hardly contain her amazement. Not only had her human consort survived, he had triumphed where trained Elendorians might have failed. As night fell, the palace quieted. Liara found Kale on the balcony, gazing at the stars once more. "You do not celebrate victories like we do," she said, curiosity mixed with admiration. He smiled faintly. "Victory is not about celebration. It is about survival, adaptation, and learning. Humans do not wait for perfection. We act, we adjust, and we grow stronger with each challenge. That is all the celebration we need." Liara stared at him in silence, realizing how much she had underestimated the human species. Elendorians were proud, refined, and strong, but humans were unpredictable, creative, and fearless in ways that her people could rarely understand. She thought about the future. Elendor was secure for now, but the galaxy was vast and dangerous. Fleets and armies could be replaced, but cunning, intelligence, and the ability to adapt could not. Kale possessed all three in abundance. He was more than a consort. He was a force capable of changing the fate of worlds. The following week, reports came of another threat, a rogue syndicate attacking outer colonies. While Elendorian commanders hesitated, Kale immediately devised a plan. Using a combination of small, fast ships, decoys, and human tactics of misdirection, he coordinated a response that minimized casualties while neutralizing the syndicate's advantage. Liara observed every move, noting how Kale adapted in real time. When one plan failed, he immediately implemented another, often using resources others considered useless. His improvisation was methodical yet fluid, instinctive yet deliberate. She could see why humans survived in dangerous conditions that Elendorians would have avoided or mismanaged. After the battle, a council member whispered, "He thinks differently than us. That is why he wins." Liara only nodded, understanding that this human consort had already begun to reshape her perception of strength, strategy, and leadership. That night she entered Kale's study. He was reviewing reports, but he looked up and smiled faintly. "Another victory, Your Majesty?" Lyra sat beside him. "Yes, and once again I am shocked by what a human can do. I expected weakness. What I see instead is something else entirely." Kale's gaze softened. Humans are often underestimated. We do not rely on appearances, size, or tradition. We rely on creativity, resilience, and determination. That is our advantage. Liara felt a mixture of admiration, excitement, and a strange sense of security. Here was someone who could protect not just her, but Elindor itself. The galaxy had written humans off as fragile, chaotic, and unpredictable, but she now knew the truth. Humans could survive, adapt, and even triumph where the strongest armies might fail. In that quiet moment, the Princess Queen realized something extraordinary. Her consort, the human she had married, was not merely surviving in her world. He was teaching her that humanity itself was a force to be reckoned with, and for the first time in her life she wondered what might happen if humans were no longer underestimated. The stars above Elindor shimmered in silent promise, hinting at challenges yet to come. Liara felt a thrill she had never known before. She was no longer just a ruler. She was a witness to the rise of a new kind of power, one that was subtle, unpredictable, and terrifyingly brilliant. And in the heart of the palace, she knew it was only the beginning. The calm after the Xeran threat was short-lived. Elindor, despite Kael's brilliant defense, could not ignore the growing unrest at its borders. Reports arrived daily, small fleets moving too quickly to track, colonies under subtle attacks, mysterious disappearances of supply ships. Lyra felt the weight of the throne heavier than ever. The council was restless, anxious, and eager to demonstrate that Elindor's strength alone could solve these threats. Kael, however, suggested a different approach. Patience and observation, he said one evening as they reviewed reports in the strategy room. The galaxy is unpredictable. Acting without understanding is dangerous. Lyra, though tempted to act immediately, saw the wisdom in his words. She had already learned that humans thrived where Elindorians hesitated or overplanned. Kael's calm voice, once unnerving, now gave her a strange sense of assurance. She trusted him, even when the council grumbled about his methods. The first test of Kael's ingenuity came in the form of a crisis no one anticipated. A sudden coordinated attack on Elindor's outer colonies caught the council off guard. Entire supply chains vanished, defenses were sabotaged, and panic spread among the planetary governors. Generals demanded immediate retaliation, ready to unleash the full fleet against the attackers. But Kael stopped them. "No," he said firmly. "A blind attack will only escalate the conflict. We need information. We need to understand who we are dealing with and why they attack in this way." Liara's brow furrowed, but she did not contradict him. She had seen enough to know that humans were not reckless. Kael organized surveillance teams, but in a way that Elindorians found unusual. Instead of relying solely on advanced sensors, he placed small, hidden probes disguised as natural debris and sent minimal crews to collect intelligence personally. He encouraged improvisation, teaching Elindorian soldiers to observe patterns in the enemy's movement, rather than simply destroy what appeared. Within days, Kael had a clear picture. The attacks were not random. The rogue syndicate used the element of surprise and confusion, assuming Elindorians would react predictably. But Kael's methods revealed weaknesses no Elindorian strategist had noticed. Their attacks were coordinated, yes, but their communications relied on easily decoded signals, and their ships avoided risk at the expense of flexibility. Liara watched as Kael outlined his plan. "We will do 3 things," he explained calmly to the council, who listened in disbelief. "First, we lure them into predictable positions. Second, we disrupt their communication in ways they cannot anticipate. Third, we use small mobile fleets to strike where they are most vulnerable."
The council protested. "You underestimate them."
"Our forces cannot be divided," one admiral shouted. Kael did not flinch. "You underestimate humans. We survive and thrive when flexibility is our weapon. Rigidity is what fails first. Trust me." Liara, feeling a mixture of admiration and nervous excitement, supported him. "We follow Kael's strategy," she said firmly. "Our lives depend on it." The first phase of the plan began at dawn. Small decoy ships lured the syndicate fleet toward a narrow asteroid field. Their movements were predictable, as Kael had predicted, and Elendorian observation teams reported their positions in real time. Hale coordinated the fleet with precision, adjusting each maneuver with the ease of someone solving a puzzle only he could see. When the enemy realized they had been trapped, it was too late. Mobile strike teams hit their weak points, disabling critical ships without destroying the entire fleet. The Syndicate commanders were stunned. They had expected overwhelming force, but Elendor had used cunning instead. They were fighting a human mind, unpredictable and adaptive, rather than brute strength. Liara felt her heart race as she watched the battle unfold. The human she had married, whom she had thought fragile, was now orchestrating a campaign that outsmarted seasoned commanders. The Council's initial skepticism had turned into awe, though many were still hesitant to admit it. Kale, however, continued with calm efficiency, ensuring that civilian colonies were protected and losses minimized. When the battle ended, Elendor had not only survived but gained strategic advantage. The Syndicate fleet was routed, their plans dismantled, and their leaders captured. Liara approached Kale in the aftermath, her eyes wide. You
predicted everything. How?
Kale shrugged lightly. Patterns, observation, improvisation. Elendorians are precise and powerful, but predictable. Humans survive where others fail because we do not rely only on rules or strength. We learn, adapt, and exploit opportunities as they appear. The realization struck her deeply. Humans were more than resilient. They were terrifyingly clever, capable of survival in ways Elendorians rarely considered. And Kale was the perfect example, unassuming, calm, and yet, in moments of crisis, unstoppable. In the following weeks, Kale's influence grew beyond strategy and warfare. He reorganized supply chains to be more efficient, introduced systems of communication between colonies that eliminated delays, and even mediated disputes that had festered for decades. His human perspective, unpredictable to Elendorians, revealed flaws that had been ignored because no one had thought to challenge tradition. Lyra observed all of this with a mix of fascination and unease. She had always believed humans were fragile, chaotic, and inferior, but here was a human proving otherwise at every turn. He was adaptable, creative, fearless, and persistent. Elendor, a kingdom that had relied on centuries of tradition and refinement, was learning from him. One day, as they reviewed progress on the outer colonies, Liara asked quietly, "Kale, do you ever fear failure?"
Kale looked at her calmly, his expression unreadable.
Fear is natural, but humans survive not because we never fear, but because we act despite fear. We adapt, we improvise, and we find solutions when others see only obstacles. That is how we endure. Lara could not help but smile faintly. She had always ruled with logic, training, and planning. But she now saw a truth she had not considered. Unpredictability, intuition, and adaptability were as powerful as any fleet or weapon. Humans had an advantage Elendorians rarely understood. Then came a challenge Kale could not predict: internal dissent. Some members of the Council, still resistant to the influence of a human, began to openly question his authority. They whispered about undermining him, claiming that Elendor's reliance on a human consort was dangerous. Liara confronted them with quiet fury. "Kyle has saved this kingdom more than you can measure. His strategies, his intelligence, his decisions, these have protected us. I will not allow your prejudice to undo what we have achieved." Even so, tension within the palace grew. Kale, aware of the whispers, did not respond with anger or threats. Instead, he continued his work with calm determination, allowing his actions to speak louder than words. Elendorian ministers, initially skeptical, began to realize that his human ingenuity could not be dismissed. Then, the final test arrived. Reports came of a rogue alien fleet approaching Elendor with unknown intentions. They moved with speed and stealth, avoiding sensors and disrupting communication channels. The Council panicked, ready to unleash the entire military, but Kale remained calm. "This is what I have been preparing for," he said softly. "We will not respond with force alone. We will observe, anticipate, and act strategically. Only then can we ensure victory." Liara, once uncertain, now trusted him completely. She gave the order to follow his plan, even though the council continued to grumble. Hale coordinated the defense with a combination of decoy signals, rapid response teams, and improvisation BAP team. His approach relied not on Elindor's massive firepower alone, but on human creativity and adaptability. The alien fleet, confident in their speed and stealth, found themselves outmaneuvered. Every move they made was anticipated, every weakness exploited. Within hours, Elindor's defenses had neutralized the threat without significant loss. The council, once vocal in their doubt, now stood in awe. Liara approached Kale afterward, a mix of admiration and disbelief in her eyes. "You've done it again. You've turned what seemed impossible into victory." Kale looked at her quietly. "Humans endure by thinking differently. We adapt, we improvise, and we act where others hesitate. Strength is not always visible, Your Majesty. Sometimes it is hidden, waiting for the right moment to appear." Liara felt a shiver of realization. The human she had married was not just capable, he was extraordinary. And the galaxy, which had dismissed humans as weak and chaotic, was blind to a species whose greatest power lay in adaptability, creativity, and resilience. For the first time, she truly understood what it meant to underestimate humans. They were not fragile. They were not weak. They were unpredictable, resourceful, and unstoppable in ways Elindorians could barely imagine. And Kale, standing calmly beside her, was living proof of it. The galaxy had grown quiet, but the calm was fragile. Intelligence reports from the outer systems brought troubling news. A massive alien coalition, larger and more organized than anything Elindor had faced before, was moving toward the planets under Lyra's rule. They called themselves the Valkyrie, a militaristic species whose armies were known for ruthlessness and precision. Even the Council, hardened by centuries of governance and warfare, whispered in fear. Liara's heart pounded as she convened the emergency council meeting. The Valkyrie fleet was approaching from multiple directions, moving faster than any Elindorian sensors had predicted. Generals demanded immediate deployment of the full fleet, a show of brute force to intimidate the attackers. Others suggested surrendering minor colonies to save the core worlds. The room was filled with tension, voices overlapping in panic and argument. Kale, standing quietly near the holographic star map, did not speak immediately. He studied the projections carefully, noting patterns in the Valkyrie fleet and predicting their likely tactics. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, almost unnervingly so. "This situation is serious but predictable," he said. "Not because the Valkyrie are weak, but because their predictability is their greatest flaw. They rely on overwhelming force and intimidation. We will not counter them with force alone. We will exploit their overconfidence and rigidity." The council stared at him, disbelief written on every face. "A human dares to tell us how to defend our kingdom?" one elder demanded. "You do not understand the scale of this threat." Liara raised her hand. "He does. And I trust him. We follow Kale's plan." Kale wasted no time. He instructed the fleet to divide into smaller, highly mobile squadrons instead of forming one massive line. He created false signals to confuse the Valkyrie, making their advanced sensors believe the defenses were scattered and weak. He deployed small, hidden strike teams to intercept supply lines and communications, disrupting the enemy's coordination. Elindorian generals shook their heads, muttering that such tactics were reckless. Kale ignored them. The first engagement came within hours. The Valkyrie fleet, confident in their superior numbers, moved to strike what they thought was the weakest planetary outpost. They were met not with overwhelming force, but with coordinated ambushes and unpredictable counterattacks. Mobile squadrons appeared where no one expected them, cutting off reinforcements and striking with surgical precision. The Varkari had never encountered tactics like these. Their rigid formations became liabilities, leaving them vulnerable. Liara watched from the command chamber, heart racing. She had seen Kael handle threats before, but the scale of this battle dwarfed everything else. The Varkari, a species renowned for conquest, were being outsmarted by a human. She felt awe and disbelief in equal measure. As the battle unfolded, Kael adjusted his strategy in real time. When one squadron was threatened by a Varkari ambush, he redirected others to flank the enemy. When communication channels were jammed, he sent small teams to deliver instructions manually, improvising on the spot. Elendorian commanders trained for years in military precision struggled to keep up. Kael's methods were fluid, adaptive, and unpredictable. Hours passed, and the tide of battle shifted in Elendor's favor. The Varkari, frustrated by unexpected losses and constant disruption, began making mistakes. They overextended, misjudged distances, and collided with each other in confusion. Kael exploited every error, turning potential threats into opportunities for victory. In the council chamber, murmurs of astonishment spread. "He anticipates their every move," one general whispered. "No alien should be able to think this way." Liara could hardly tear her eyes away from the holographic displays. She saw not only Kael's brilliance, but also the essence of humanity itself, adaptable, resilient, and fearless in the face of danger. The species she had once underestimated was proving to be the most dangerous force in the galaxy, not through sheer strength, but through intellect and creativity. The turning point came when the Varkari attempted a direct assault on Elendor's capital fleet. Kael had anticipated this move and set a trap. False signals drew the enemy into a narrow corridor between two asteroid belts. Hidden batteries and ambush teams struck from all sides, disabling the flagship and scattering the fleet. The Varkari commanders, unprepared for such cunning, were forced to retreat. Liara felt her chest swell with a mix of relief and admiration. Kael, standing quietly among the council, did not celebrate. He simply adjusted plans for the aftermath, ensuring that colonies were secured and civilians protected. His focus was relentless, calm, and precise. In the aftermath of the battle, the Elendorian Council could no longer deny the truth. The human they had once dismissed as fragile, incompetent, or naive had not only protected the kingdom but reshaped the entire approach to defense. Kael had done what no Elendorian general had thought possible. He had turned a seemingly hopeless situation into a decisive victory. Even so, the Varkari threat was not entirely neutralized. Scouts reported smaller strike teams regrouping, seeking weaknesses in the outer colonies. Kael, anticipating this, organized rapid response teams, training Elendorian soldiers in improvisation and adaptive combat techniques. He emphasized flexibility, observation, and quick decision-making, qualities Elendorians had rarely valued, yet proved to be decisive in battle. Liara watched him teach the soldiers, noting how naturally he inspired confidence. His presence alone changed their behavior. They moved faster, thought differently, and adapted to situations they had previously deemed impossible. The difference was stark. Humans improvised, Elendorians relied on structure. The result was immediate and effective. Late one night, Liara found Kael alone in the observation tower, gazing at the stars. "You've changed everything," she said quietly. "The council, the armies, even I am not the same as before." Kael turned to her, expression calm. "Humans have a way of forcing change," he said simply. "We do not wait for perfection or permission. We act, adapt, and endure. That is how we survive." Lyra felt a shiver of realization. Elendor had always valued strength, precision, and discipline, but Kael had shown her a different kind of power, unpredictable, adaptive, and unstoppable. Humans, she now understood, were not weak. They were extraordinary in ways no one had anticipated. The next day brought news that tested Kale's ingenuity further. The Varkari had captured a small colony and threatened to destroy it unless Elindor surrendered critical resources. The council demanded an immediate strike to retake the colony, fearing that delay would embolden the enemy. Kale disagreed. "We cannot fight them directly," he said. "They expect us to act rashly. Instead, we will use misdirection and strategy. We will make them believe the colony is already lost, while secretly preparing a rescue mission that they cannot anticipate." Liara hesitated but trusted him. "Do it," she said. Kale orchestrated a multi-layered plan. Elindorian drones created false transmissions of evacuation and surrender. Supply shipments were disguised as ordinary trade. Small, agile teams infiltrated the colony under cover of night, disabling defenses silently and preparing civilians for extraction. Kale coordinated every move, adjusting to unexpected obstacles without hesitation. When the Varkari arrived to enforce their threat, they found the colony empty of resistance, with Elendorian forces already in strategic positions. They were trapped and forced to retreat, unable to achieve their objective. The council, who had doubted him repeatedly, now openly praised Kale's brilliance. Liara approached him afterward, heart pounding. I never imagined a human could accomplish so much. You've turned our expectations upside down." Kale smiled faintly. "Humans are underestimated because our strengths are not obvious. We survive, adapt, and overcome where others fail. That is what Elindor has begun to see." Liara felt a surge of respect and something more profound, a sense of awe at the human she had married. Not only had he protected her kingdom, but he had also revealed a new kind of power to the galaxy, one rooted in intelligence, adaptability, and the courage to act where others hesitated. As night fell over Elindor, the stars above shimmered like silent witnesses to the events unfolding below. Lyra realized that this human, calm and unassuming, had become the kingdom's greatest weapon and its most unpredictable force. The galaxy might continue to underestimate humans, but she knew the truth now. Humans were not fragile, they were unstoppable. And Kale, her human consort, had proven it beyond question. The council, once skeptical, now looked to him for guidance. Soldiers, once doubtful, now followed his instructions without hesitation, and Liara, the Princess Queen, finally understood that she was not just married to a human, she was partnered with a force capable of shaping the future of the galaxy. The Varkari would return, other threats would arise, and Elindor would face dangers no one could predict. But Liara knew this. With Kale at her side, humanity's ingenuity, adaptability, and resilience would always give them the edge. The galaxy had been warned. The humans were not to be underestimated, and in that knowledge she felt a thrill of power, anticipation, and awe. The human she had married was not just a partner. He was a revolution in himself. The victory over the Varkari fleet had given Elindor a momentary peace, but Lyra knew it was only temporary. Across the galaxy, threats were endless. Pirates, syndicates, rival empires, and mysterious alien civilizations always waited for moments of weakness. Yet, standing beside Kale in the Grand Command Hall, she felt a confidence she had never known before. Kale moved among the council with calm authority, not as a human outsider, but as a leader who had earned their respect through action. Soldiers and ministers alike listened carefully to his advice, and even the skeptics had begun to accept that Elindor's future rested on his ingenuity. Liara observed him quietly, her thoughts filled with awe. He had transformed the kingdom's defenses, taught her council new ways of thinking, and had proven that humans, once dismissed as fragile, were perhaps the most dangerous species in the galaxy when underestimated. But Kale was not content to simply react to threats. He had a vision, a way to secure Elindor and protect the galaxy without relying on brute force alone. "Your Majesty," he said one evening as they studied star charts, "we have the power to prevent wars before they start, but we cannot do it with weapons alone. We need strategy, intelligence, and understanding. Liara leaned forward, intrigued. "And you believe humans can lead that?" He met her gaze steadily. "Not humans alone, but with humans, and Elendorians together, yes. We can anticipate threats, outsmart enemies, and protect peace in ways no other species could." She realized then that Kale was not only a protector, but a teacher. The human she had married had begun shaping Elendor not just for survival, but for dominance. A dominance rooted in cleverness, adaptability, and insight, rather than fear or intimidation. Their first true test of this vision came sooner than expected. Intelligence reports indicated that a coalition of alien warlords, jealous of Elendor's growing power, were planning a surprise attack on multiple planets simultaneously. If they succeeded, the entire kingdom could be overwhelmed before reinforcements could arrive. The council panicked, proposing massive preemptive strikes. But Kale had another plan. "We will split our resources," he explained, pointing to the star map. "We cannot fight them all at once, but we can manipulate the battlefield. We will create the illusion of weakness, draw them into traps, and strike where they do not expect. Precision, timing, and adaptability will give us the advantage." Liara watched him coordinate operations. Every move was deliberate. Every decision balanced on careful observation and anticipation of the enemy's psychology. Kale had taught her fleet to act unpredictably, to use improvisation as a weapon, and to exploit even the smallest mistakes. Soldiers who had doubted him before now moved like extensions of his mind, trusting his instincts as much as their own training. The first engagements were astonishing. Alien fleets expected Elendor to follow traditional strategies, massive, rigid formations, and direct confrontation. Instead, they encountered small, mobile strike teams, sudden ambushes, and false transmissions that made their intelligence useless. Entire fleets were disrupted without a single planet lost. Kale's tactics relied on flexibility and unpredictability, qualities the aliens could not comprehend. Liara felt a mixture of awe and pride as she watched him direct the battle. The human she had once thought fragile was now orchestrating operations on a scale larger than any Elendorian commander had ever attempted. His mind moved faster than anyone's in the room, anticipating errors and exploiting opportunities with precision and creativity. The turning point came during the final confrontation. The alien warlords had concentrated their forces on Elendor's capital planet, hoping to break the kingdom's will by striking at its heart. Kale anticipated this and had prepared an ingenious trap. Using decoy fleets, hidden energy barriers, and unexpected reinforcements from outer colonies, he funneled the attackers into a narrow corridor. When the enemy reached the point of no return, Elendor's forces struck from all sides. The result was decisive. Ships were disabled or captured, commanders were neutralized, and the remaining forces were forced to retreat. Elendor had won not through brute force, but through intelligence, adaptability, and the unpredictable brilliance of a human leader. The council was speechless. Soldiers cheered. And Lyra, watching Kale with a mix of admiration and awe, realized that she had married not just a consort, but a revolutionary force. After the battle, Elendor celebrated its unprecedented victory. Kale, however, did not seek praise. He worked quietly to secure the colonies, treat the wounded, and reorganize resources. His focus was unwavering, his calm a stark contrast to the chaos that had surrounded the kingdom only days before. Liara found him later in the royal gardens. The twin moons of Elendor cast soft light on the glowing flowers, their petals shimmering like stars. She approached him quietly, her thoughts racing. "You've done more than I could have imagined," she said. "You've not only protected Elendor, but changed the way we think about power itself." Kale turned to her, eyes steady and calm. "Humans are often underestimated," he said. "We survive because we adapt, improvise, and act when others hesitate. Elendor has taught me much as well, but I hope we can show the galaxy that strength is not just about size or tradition. It is about intelligence, flexibility, and courage." Liara felt a warmth in her chest. She had spent her life surrounded by power and strategy, yet Kale had taught her a new definition of strength. Humans were not weak or fragile. They were resilient, unpredictable, and unstoppable when their minds were sharp and their will strong. The next weeks were spent consolidating Elendor's power. Kale introduced reforms that improved communication across planets, reorganized the military for maximum flexibility, and created systems that allowed colonies to respond independently to threats. He trained soldiers in human-style improvisation and problem-solving, blending their discipline with adaptability. Citizens of Elendor began to notice changes as well. Supply lines ran smoother, resources reached everyone faster, and disputes were resolved with less bloodshed. Kale's human perspective had transformed the kingdom quietly but effectively. Where Elendorians had once relied solely on rigid tradition, they now embraced creativity, observation, and adaptability, qualities Kale embodied. One day, a fleet from a distant empire arrived, curious about Elendor's growing reputation. They expected threats, arrogance, and a display of overwhelming force. Instead, they were met with a coordinated, intelligent defense, subtle yet unmistakably powerful. The message was clear. Elendor was not just a kingdom to be feared for its fleets, but for its brilliance, its adaptability, and the humans who shaped it. Liara watched the proceedings from the palace balcony, her hand resting lightly on Kale's. She felt a mixture of pride, admiration, and something deeper. This human had not only changed her kingdom, but had changed her perception of the galaxy itself. "You've made them respect Elendor in ways I never imagined," she said softly. Kale smiled faintly. "Respect is earned, not demanded. Humans survive because we find ways to adapt, to act where others hesitate, and to turn challenges into opportunities. That is the advantage we bring." Liara felt a thrill of understanding. The galaxy had dismissed humans as weak, chaotic, and fragile. Kale had proven otherwise. He was not just a protector of Elendor. He was a symbol of humanity's untapped potential. The final challenge arrived quietly. A coalition of smaller alien factions, observing Elendor's victories, attempted to undermine the kingdom through diplomacy and deception. They believed that no human could influence outcomes at the scale Elendor had achieved. Kyle, however, anticipated their moves. He responded with intelligence, strategy, and negotiation, blending diplomacy with subtle psychological insight. Entire negotiations turned in Elendor's favor without a single battle, leaving the alien factions stunned and cautious. Liara realized that this was the true power Kale wielded. Not weapons, not armies, but intellect, unpredictability, and insight. Humans, she understood now, had an advantage the galaxy could never fully anticipate, and Elendor, guided by Kale, was proof of that fact. As Elendor settled into a new era of stability, Liara and Kale walked together through the palace gardens, the night sky filled with stars that stretched beyond the imagination. "I once thought humans were fragile," she admitted, "but I see now that they are anything but." Kale looked at her, calm and steady. "Humans survive because we adapt. We think creatively, and we act when others hesitate. Elendor has taught me much, but together, we have shown the galaxy a new kind of strength, one that cannot be predicted or defeated easily." Liara smiled, her heart full. She realized that she had married not just a human, but a force capable of shaping the destiny of worlds. The galaxy had dismissed him, dismissed humans. Yet here he stood, victorious, intelligent, and unstoppable. The citizens of Elendor would tell stories of this human and their princess queen for generations. Across the galaxy, whispers of human ingenuity and unpredictability began to spread. Elendor had survived countless threats, not because of its fleets alone, but because of the extraordinary human who had proven that survival, adaptability, and intelligence could triumph over even the greatest odds. And Laia, the princess queen, stood beside him, proud, amazed. The human she had married had changed the kingdom, the council, and perhaps the entire galaxy. Humans were no longer underestimated. They were unstoppable. The stars above shimmered silently, as if acknowledging the truth. Helendor was safe, strong, and brilliant. Humanity had arrived, and with Kale at its heart, the galaxy would never be the same again. Liara placed her hand in his, feeling the quiet strength radiating from him. "We've done more than survive," she said softly.
"We've changed the galaxy." Kale smiled. "Humans endure."
"We adapt. We triumph. And sometimes we exceed even the greatest expectations." Together, they looked out over Elendor, the kingdom they had protected, shaped, and transformed. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of a new power, one that relied not on size or strength alone, but on the human mind, creativity, and will. And the Princess Queen knew without doubt that the human she had married would continue to shape the future for centuries to come.